Hi, I'm Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com and the Breathe Life's Inspirations blog. I've been doing a Your Health on Stress and What You Can Do video blog weekly, and if you want to subscribe, I will send you announcements about that. These Facebook Lives, I have been posting them on YouTube as well. Today, I am talking a little bit more about posture. So this is another piece that is relating to the foot position stuff that I was talking about before. Today, I'm going to talk about head position and how all of this matters for health, bone density, like we've been talking about when it came to foot position. So I gave you a little bit of time to play around with foot position. Now we're moving to the other end, and they definitely relate to each other. So I was talking before about how with foot position being turned out like it is for lots of people, how you have weight distributed through the foot going the wrong place, causing issues with bunions, flat feet, and that kind of thing, and impacting bone density in all of the bones. So now we're going to talk about when you have your foot position out, how does that impact your head position? And how does changing foot position and changing head position make a difference? Okay, so when the feet are out, right? So when the feet are out, that leads to the feet caving in, right? So it's like caving in this way. And so the pelvis winds up shifting forward. And you can see how my upper body goes back, and then my head goes forward to compensate for it. So you have several postural issues that are consistently problematic for people and their health, showing up in this place. So you have the foot things, flat feet, bunions, okay, and all sorts of imbalances happening in the feet. You have the hips being forward and the upper body compensating by going back, and then the head position. So you have strain going on in the lower back, right, from having the pelvis be forward and all the muscles trying to hold on, doing that, okay? And then you have upper back tension trying to compensate for the upper back not being supported, and then the head being forward, and you have tight muscles all through these whole areas. Let's talk about the head position part of this today. So, and the head position winds up being forward for people even if they've made the other adjustments, right? So the feet are parallel, the hips are back, and you can still have this whole head position being forward issue. And current life in our world that is very much phone, iPad, computer oriented feeds into this pattern. If we started off life with having the more natural and supportive foot parallel and body issues positioning more properly, we might not get into the same head position pattern as we do in our society. But because we, over the course of our lifetime, have had these other issues going on, people tend to have their heads forward anyway, and then lifestyle patterns feed into it. So now we're going to talk about the head part. So if all of my time I spend on my phone or on my computer looking down, then that has me spend a lot of time in this position, and the bones and the muscles and the tissues wind up forming themselves in a way that is just going along with that pattern. So part of it is certainly habitual. It's not just how I'm using the rest of my body, but what I'm doing with this part. So the forward head position goes along with having the shoulders be forward and having the arms be forward. And as a massage therapist for 28 years now, I always wind up talking to people about how we get into these postures and how to start to reverse that or unwind it and allow the body to be more balanced. So it's like if all of my life I spend with my arms and my attention all focused in front of me, that leads into this whole thing that we see. If everything I do is out here in front of me and I'm not paying attention to where my head and my shoulders are, then I am spending way too much time in that position. If I'm always holding a book, right, that naturally has my shoulders be forward and my head go forward. When I'm really concentrating on something, I suck my head into whatever it is I'm focusing on. If I'm really pulled into a project on the computer, that also feeds into this. I tend to put my head, my eyes, getting closer and closer and closer to whatever it is I'm focusing on. Understanding that this feeds into this whole postural conditioning that I wind up seeing in people over and over and over again in doing body work for a very long time. So I've been educating people for all of that time on why we get into that and the long-term impacts of it. So when my head is forward, right, how I describe it is that the head is like a bowling ball. You have this big weight that, like we were talking about before, is designed to be supported by the bones of the rest of the body. You know, when I was having that foot position talk, I was talking about if my body weight is over my ankles, instead of having my hips forward and bring my hips back, and instead of having my hips forward, my head back, right, my upper body back and then head pulled forward, if I allow everything to be in alignment so that all of my body mass is stacked over the bones, causing the bones to be dense, okay? But looking at it from the head position, right, if my head is stuck forward, right, imagine this is the body, right, and this is the base of the neck, okay, and then this is the head, with the head on here, okay, I have a bowling ball's worth of weight cantilevered out on the end of the neck, sticking out over the body, over the front of the body, right? And if the body is here, does it make sense that when I'm holding this bowling ball out in space, it's a lot of work to keep it upright? Who knew? So the body is designed to have this bowling ball be supported by the neck, by the torso, the legs, and ultimately the ground. So if I notice myself having my head stuck forward, whatever else I'm doing with the rest of the body, oh, bring my head back. And the truth is that people get so stuck in that position that the bones and the muscles and the tissues have formed themselves to support the head in that cantilevered, stuck out in front position. So I'm not going to be able to just have my head be all the way back. To go from having it like this for my whole life to being able to have it back, not realistic. It takes time with the demand placed on those tissues to get them to be able to be farther back, to get the head to be able to be over the body. But if I start changing that pattern now, then it becomes more possible. If over time I correct this head position so that it becomes more normal to my body to have it back, then it doesn't feel as weird. And how the tissues, the cells that replace themselves all the time, replace themselves with a different position. Does it make sense? If I'm always like this, I'm not used to having my head be back. More often I change the position, the closer to normal it gets. So that change in foot position that I was talking about, that I made years ago, for me, that is now pretty natural, and it feels weird when my feet are out. And so I don't have to make the correction very often. This head position thing, I still make that correction. I've been correcting this for over 25 years because I became aware of the head position thing actually before I became aware of the foot position. So I have been making this head position correction for a really long time, and I still need to make it. But the more I do it, the longer I do it, the more unnatural it feels having it forward. And so I notice all of the time, it's like I'm sticking my head forward, bring it back, sticking my head forward, bringing it back. I actually have to make that correction more often than I make the foot position correction, because the foot position correction feels natural and it is more natural. It is closer to being natural for me to have my head be back since I've been making the correction for a really long time, but I still have to make it. But the bones and the tissues, for me, have allowed me to have this correction be more normal physiologically in terms of how my tissues are formed, because I have been doing it long enough that as the cells of the muscles and the bones and ligaments replace themselves, they're replacing themselves in a different position, in a different way than if I were still in the continual forward head position. Let's talk about what happens when a bone forms. So bones form in a certain way, again, depending on the demand that's placed on them. So if I broke a bone and it were not set properly, for example, and there were a bend in the bone, it wouldn't be that extreme, but just for the purposes of example, right? So imagine that I had broken a bone and I wasn't able to get it set, and it healed in a position that had a bend in it. Over time, if I put normal demands on the bone that would require it to be more straight, over time, the bone will reform itself, because the demand is not in this bend, right? There is not going to be demand for this bone tissue out here in the bend, and there's going to be more demand for the bone tissue here where there's this void. So the body is going to take this bone tissue out and build more bone tissue in here, so that over time it becomes gradually more straightened. Similar to what happens with the whole bunions, like we were talking about. When I put demand on the foot bone there, it puts more tissue there. So in this case of the broken bone, the same thing is happening. If I am not putting demand out here, because I don't need bone here, that bend is not needed. What I need is a straight bone, so there's more bone here where there's the current void. So over time, as the body pulls these cells out, because they're not demanded to be here, there's no load here, and I put demand here because there is load here, then that bone will straighten itself. Now, it probably won't ever get to be all the way back to normal, as if the bone hadn't been broken, but it will be closer. And it's all because of the demand that is placed. So if I am accustomed to having my head be forward, the demand is I need more tissue in the front to support the weight of the head. And so you see people's neck muscles get really, really tight in the front. And there's probably some bony change that winds up happening too. And then because there's so much demand on the muscles back here to hold the head up, that gets really bulked up. And you see people with the Dowagers Hump area here. Why does that form? Because of demand for supporting the head. If the head is always forward, these muscles, right? You have muscles here that come up to support the neck and the head, this big weight, the bowling ball, and those muscles get really tight trying to support this weight. And it puts all this demand on the bones here. So it causes a bump here. There's demand here. And the vertebrae change in how they're configured. The shape of the bone gets changed a little bit, just like the bone changes shape when the demand changes. Same thing happens with the bones and the ligaments and the muscles. They form to support the bowling ball cantilevered out in space. So as you change that head position and you bring it back so that it's actually being supported by the body doesn't have to do that anymore. And so over time, you can possibly lose this Dowagers Hump area, or at least make it smaller. And at the very least, not make it bigger. Because the longer I have my head stuck out in front, the bigger and bigger this is required to be. I remember seeing an old man in Olympia many, many years ago. And he would wander, go do his thing through downtown Olympia. And his posture was like this. And it was hard for him even to walk because the upper body was not being supported by the lower body, and his head was way stuck out in front. So obviously most people are not like that, which is good because it's just not healthy. But it's an extreme example of what happens as an extension of this forward head posture. Nobody's body is born like that. That happens because of how we use the body, possibly injury. You have the ability to impact the tissues that your body forms by how you use your body. By changing your posture, changing how the weight is distributed, changing how you use your muscles, how you use your bones, the demand you place on your bones. Because every cell in your body gets replaced. Theory is every 7 years, every cell is replaced. Some are replaced every couple of days. The tissues in your mouth, the tissues in your small intestine. Those are replaced very, very frequently. The bones are replaced much less frequently. So the replacement rate is very slow. But if you start putting a different demand on, I'm going to say that maybe your body is going to replace those a little bit more often. So it's like with this broken bone issue. If your body does not have enough bone here to support the weight, it's going to say, hey, we need that. Better put more bone in there. Right? This bone in here is like, oh, well, let's change that. So by placing a different demand, you might change the rate at which that replacement occurs. Allowing your bones and your muscles and your ligaments to reform themselves in a way that's actually more supportive of your health. All right, I think that's it. This is Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com and the Breathe Life Inspirations blog. These will all be posted on YouTube. And on my personal page, I'm going to start posting more videos. I haven't been doing that. And learning that it enables more people to interact with me. And it's not necessarily all this stuff, but I'm going to be showing you some fun things about where I live. And going to do a little bit of cooking, actually demonstrate some cooking for you. So have a wonderful day, breathe. Oh, and if you want to do healing, global healing, I'm going to be putting some stuff out about that too. Sandra Lee, have a wonderful day.